I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master has opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yenabhutale Swayam Rupa Padamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Please could you give the garland to Chaitanya Chintamani Dasi?
Okay. You're allergic.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry. You're going to have to give it to the speaker.
No.
Yes?
To go up without.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lucky
Yeah. Thank you for such a beautiful bhajan and kirtan. And I just want to thank all the kirtaniyas for visiting us. Totally inspired and enlivened us. We feel very blessed by your presence. So our class today is titled White Lotus Blooming in Darkest Night, the Prayers of Lord Chaitanya. So I thought today we could focus on a close reading of the Shikshastikam prayers, which are 8 beautiful verses written in Sanskrit, detailing the process of devotion. They're like sutras, showing the whole process of bhakti in 8 verses, and they were composed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these are very elevated prayers, and I feel very unqualified to explain them fully. But with the blessings and the mercy of the Vaishnavas, I will attempt to shed some light on them to the limits of my understanding. So we're passing around the Shikshastikam prayers to you now. The first verse of each verse is in Sanskrit, and then there's the translation in English. So who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? As many of you know, he descended to this world in the form of a perfect devotee. He's Krishna himself. And he came here in order to show us practically how to attain the highest level of spiritual realization, step by step. It's a very rare and unusual occurrence when the divine transforms himself into his own devotee out of deep compassion. Actually, Lord Chaitanya descends only in one day of Brahma. Now, Brahma is a very elevated living being. He manages this entire material world. And the daytime of Brahma is 4,320,000,000 years. And his night is of the same duration. So Lord Chaitanya comes every 8,640,000,000,000 years. I can't even conceive of that number. But we're so fortunate that he descended to this world just 500 years ago in Navadvip in Bengal. And we're following the process of devotion, bhakti, as delineated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And if you look at the altar over there's 5 figures in a diorama dancing beautifully. And the middle figure is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the others are his associates. Because God never comes alone. He always comes with his entourage. And his entourage are the Panchatattva. And every day we chant Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Because God always comes with devotees. And the process for this age is the congregational chanting of the holy names. So we can't really progress nicely without the devotees. And Lord Chaitanya is showing that to us straight away by always appearing with his associates. So what does it mean, white lotus blooming in darkest night? Well, it sounds like a nice Japanese kaon, but what is the meaning in terms of bhakti. And I was thinking about lotuses and what they mean in our bhakti marg. And first and foremost, the white lotus is Lord Chaitanya. Actually, he's golden, and he came into the darkest night of Kali Yuga, which is the present age in which we find ourselves. And he came to shed the rays of light, helping us gradually reach the stage of unlimited bliss, Satchit Ananda Vigraha. So the Sankirtan movement as well can be seen as that white lotus. The process for the spiritual realization in this age is the chanting of the holy names, Sankirtan. And actually, in the first verse of the Shikshastikam, there's the word Kairava. And Kairava means a divine white lotus, emitting beautiful moon rays of benediction and mercy. And that is the Sankirtan movement. The chanting of the holy names are like waves, ever-increasing vibrational waves that uplift us and will gradually take us out of this material world and into the spiritual world. So in Vedic iconography as a whole, the white lotus is a symbol of absolute purity and perfection. Lord Vishnu's navel is lotus-shaped. From this lotus-shaped navel grows this beautiful lotus stem, and on the top of the lotus stem, in the petals, sits Lord Brahma, and from that lotus, he designs the entire material world. And all the planets in the material world are situated on the stem of that lotus. And we're situated somewhere in the middle, Bhuloka. So we have heaven and hell in equal measure on this planet. In Kundalini Yoga, the inner universe is seen as a series of 7 chakras, and the chakras are often depicted as lotuses in various stages of unfurling. The topmost lotus is the Sahasrara chakra lotus, which is 1,000 petals. And even today, somehow there's lotuses in the temple room. So there's lotuses everywhere. They represent the benediction of Lakshmiji as well. Lakshmi sits on a beautiful pink lotus, and she dispenses good fortune throughout the universe. And Goddess Saraswati she sits on a white lotus, and that white lotus depicts the perfection of learning, and all the disciplines, sciences, arts, and philosophy. So let's chant the first verse together. Before we begin chanting, I just want to mention a couple of basic rules of Sanskrit. The C is pronounced cha, so it's cheto and chandrika. And then every time you see an S with any kind of mark on it, or it might have a dot underneath it, or an accent, acute accent on top, then it's pronounced sh, so Shreya. And then when you have a Macron, and this is not the name of the French Prime Minister, but it's actually it's a diacritical sign, which is a line. You'll notice there's lines above some of the vowels, marjanam. So that means that vowel that has a Macron on it is emphasized and it's elongated. Chetu darpana marjanam. So let's chant the first verse. We'll do the Sanskrit and English together. Chetu darpana marjanam bhavama davati vafanam shreya kairava tantrika vitaranam vidyavadu jivanam anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam gurunam vichasvadanam sarvatmasnapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years, and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. So there's very beautiful images here of darkness, of light, mirrors and dust, burning forest fires and cooling moons. And let's explore a little bit what the underlying meaning is behind them. The verse starts with the words Chetur Dharpana Marjana. Chetaha means of the heart, Dharpana means the mirror, and Marjana means cleansing. So straight away, Lord Chaitanya is saying we need to cleanse the heart. And the heart is described as a mirror covered by dust. Now, this is a very easy metaphor we can all relate to. I know if I don't wipe the mirror in my room, every couple of days I come to it and it's full of these tiny specks of dust. And I can't really see myself clearly in it. And what to speak of a mirror that's been left untouched for decades? The dust gets so thick that we can't see anything in it. We don't even know that there is something reflective under it. And that dust symbolizes the ego. And the ego, one of the manifestations of the ego is lust. So that means the drive to put ourselves at the center and everyone else at the periphery. And that is what's covering the heart, actually, the mirror of the heart. And why is the heart a mirror? Because inside the heart is the soul. But we can't see the soul. Or some of us can't, because we're covered by different degrees of lust. We can't see the soul within. And Shri Krishna emphasizes this in Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the 38th verse of the 3rd chapter, where he says, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by lust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. And in his purport, Srila Prabhupada describes how the mirror of the mind is covered by the dust of material consciousness. The way to wipe away this dust, the best process, is to chant the holy names of the Lord. Once the mind is clear, one can see one's true self as a beautiful, shining spirit soul, just as we might clearly see ourselves in a highly polished mirror. Chanting of the holy names is also given a prominent position by Lord Chaitanya in this first verse. We are burning in the blazing forest fire of material existence of samsara. So the material world is described as a fire, blazing fire, and we're burning in it. And what is that burning? Burning is suffering. We're all suffering to certain degrees. And not only this life, but many lives, actually. So the samsara, the wheel of reincarnation, is repeated birth and death, is also described as this fire. So throughout Vedic literature, actually, the metaphor of reincarnation is compared to a firestorm that consumes everything in its path, and nothing escapes it. So once we hit the material world, then with it comes that burning suffering. And that includes both the hellish planets and the heavenly planets. They're all places of suffering, wherein repeated birth and death take place. in Mangalarti, for those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to attend it, we sing very beautiful prayer to the spiritual master, Shri Guru Vaishnava prayers, which were written by Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, who appeared in the middle of the 17th century, a prominent figure in the Krishna conscious chain of gurus and disciples. And the first verse is Samsara Davana Analida Loka. Samsara is material existence, and Dava Anala is the forest fire. So we're all burning in the forest fire of material existence, and the spiritual master comes along as a beautiful cloud, full of water, and showers his mercy on us, and puts out that forest fire. So similarly, the Sankirtan movement has the same effect on us, and it's described slightly differently as a moon with beautiful rays, cooling rays. So anyone who's gone to India knows how burning and hot that sun can be. And at night, when the sun goes down and the moon shines, it's very cooling to the mind and the heart. And this is exactly what the Sankirtan movement does for us on a spiritual, subtle level. The white lotus is compared to the holy name, which emits fragrant and auspicious rays, cooling the constant burning in the hearts of all conditioned souls. The next verse of the Shikshastikam will show us how to engage in this process of Sankirtan. Nam Nam Kali Bauda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pitani Amita Smaranena Kalava Etadrishi Tavakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durgevani Drishami Anjali Nanoduragava. O my Lord, the holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names, like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you've invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction to them. So the holy name of the Lord is invested with all the special Shaktis. All the Lord's energies are inside this name. Bija Sarva Shakti. So in this day and age, we're all desperately trying to have some kind of Shakti or some kind of power to make a difference in the world, to make our mark in the world, and to somehow find our place in the world. And apparently we all have superpowers. And many people spend thousands of euros or hours trying to discover what these superpowers are, what their special talents are, how they're going to make a difference to the world, how they're going to make their way in the world. But this verse is telling us that the holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. In his transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. So all the power in the world is invested in the beautiful holy names. It's so easy, actually, it doesn't cost anything. All we have to do is to say it. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's actually, what's missing is our faith in those names. Our faith that they can actually give us everything we want and more. I remember when I first had a little hint that Krishna was calling me. It was when I was 14. I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid era. It was very heavy energy, And I was sort of searching for something a bit different from the world I was experiencing. And that first time, actually, one of the first times I met the Hare Krishna devotees was at a flea market in an industrial area of town. And there were these tanks, one after another, going over this bridge in a slow procession. Really eerie, but I'd become so accustomed to it, I didn't even notice it. It's just normal. And this devotee jumped out at me with this, I think it was simply wonderful. And he said to me, "Isn't it terrible?" And I looked up and I saw the tanks, and I was like, yes, it is terrible. Somehow he jolted me out of the conditioning I was in. And then he offered me one of the Simply Wonderfuls. But I was like, no, I'm not taking something that's not wrapped up and all this dust was swirling around. And then as I said no, this policeman came and told him to move on. I told him to stop giving out food. And then I think the next time I saw some connection with Krishna was I got a simple flyer, purple paper, and with simple black printing on it, really budget printing, and it was advertising Govinda's restaurant in Hillbrow, which was in the centre of Johannesburg, and it had a little line drawing of Govinda with his flutes. I think it was Gopal, little baby Krishna. And it had the mantra actually around the borders. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I looked at it, I thought, this is so ridiculous. They've come up with this nonsense rhyme, and they've made it into a border. Couldn't they think of anything more creative? So it was quite disparaging of it. I was like, but I was still looking for Govindas, because I was trying to be vegetarian, and I went around looking for Govindas, but they'd already closed the place by then. But it's amazing, I realized today, which is decades later, that now I'm chanting this mantra every day on beads. And my star is actually the same color as that flyer. So this is Krishna's mystic little reciprocation. So actually, what is the Hare Krishna mantra? Because in this verse, Mahaprabhu says, you can chant any names of Krishna. Krishna, Govinda, thousands of names, and they're all potent. The Lord Chaitanya himself, he chanted the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So why did he chant these names of Krishna, Hare, Krishna, and Rama, in this kind of configuration? And that's because these names together are configured to have a specific kind of potency. They become a yantra actually. They're not just one-dimensional, but the vibration actually is multi-dimensional. And this is a yantra which will clean it up. We're dissolving, and by doing that, we will see the beautiful, shining soul become revealed more and more. And that is the potency that we can have from it. And this is what Lord Chaitanya says. It's that can bring us all good fortune, and that's material fortune as well as spiritual fortune. So it's a wish fulfilling gem. But do we have the faith to see it? And while we don't have the faith to see that, like myself, then we just take on the discipline of chanting every day, that's the sadhana bhakti. So we chant 16 rounds of the Maha every day, even all the time. We undertake it as a matter of purification, knowing that the faith will come appropriate actually. It sterilizes us immediately, no matter where we are, and that is self. We have been given the greatest gift for free, but so many take it as a cheap trinket, not it for other attractions. So a very small percent of people in the world will chant this mantra and take such an easy process, but we don't want it. Meditation is required to reap the true benefit of the holy names. The Lord Chaitanya tells us in the third verse of the Shikshastakam, Trinadapi sunichena Talorapi sahishnuna Amanina manarina Kirtanya Saravadi. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Now this is quite a difficult thing to do, at least I find. It's a struggle actually to try and be humble and tolerant. But that is what we need to do. We want to chant the holy names and experience the bliss that the holy names gives us. If we think of downtrodden grass, which is actually how Srila Prabhupada translates Trinadapi, then we often think that's the last thing in the world I want to be, is downtrodden. You know, it's just, it doesn't feel appealing from the material point of view. And not only we should be lower than grass, but we should be like straw. And the difference between straw and grass is that grass pops up when you step on it, bows down for a moment, and then the minute you walk away, it pops up again. So it's an attempt, a noble attempt at humility, but it's not the true humility. Whereas a straw, it's always doing dandavats. No matter what you do to it, it's always down on the ground. Well, that's a nice meditation for us. And more tolerant than a tree. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya explains that the tree delivers its fruits and flowers, and whatever else it possesses, to anyone and everyone. It tolerates scorching heat and torrents of rain, yet it still gives shelter to others. So this is the aspiration of a devotee, to see the super soul in the heart of every living entity, and understanding that we're all part and parcel of Krishna. The devotees often put this verse in a kavach around their necks, just to remind us to not let the false ego get the better of us. And we don't always succeed, actually. It's a constant struggle for some of us. Others are very naturally humble, because they did this work in a previous life. But for those of us who didn't, we've got to buckle down and do it, and it's hard. So our whole aim is to become really, truly humble, and not resentfully humble. So the real true humility is very blissful, actually. And if one feels resentment in being humble, then one should set boundaries. This is what His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj told me once, many years ago. When I was trying to be like the straw in the street, but I was feeling very downtrodden and very overburdened for all the services that devotees expected me to do. And I was actually in tears. I was totally overwhelmed. And he said to me, Dhira Lalita, just to say you can't do it, I'm sorry I can't do it, that is also humility. To admit your limitations is also humility. So he was just giving me a practical way of how to do this process and not get completely frustrated and angry. So true humility is not dysfunctional, but it enlivens both the one who embodies it and those around him. In his nectar of instruction, Sanatana Goswami describes imitation humility as niyamagraha, or fanaticism, as opposed to sato-vritti, which means following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas according to our particular level of understanding. Krishnadas Kaviraj explains the highest standard and the ultimate goal. However, we need to also act according to our level of advancement and to what we can tolerate according to time, place, and circumstance. So it's really a balance between our spiritual aspiration and our material limitations. And balancing those is many of us are still perfecting. Hare Krishna, welcome. Please come in and sit in the front. Desire to accumulate wealth. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. So this is also quite hard, not to desire all these things, because this is what everyone in the world wants. You want dhanam, be rich, janam, big family and many followers, and sundarim, very beautiful women, and kavitam, which are fruit activities described in the Karmakandya section of the Vedas. So, but an advanced devotee doesn't have this world because they pale in comparison to the jewels of purity of heart. He genuinely does not find attraction for them. We naturally give up something lower if we get something higher. For example, if someone offers us a wonderful feast cooked by Amanda Vikrama and his team, are we going to say no and have the peanut butter sandwich that we have in our bag? No, we're going to forget about that sandwich. We're going to find it squashed in the bag. We completely forgot about it and just eat and relish the beautiful feast that the devotees have cooked. So in the same way, actually access Anandam Buddhi, ever-growing ocean of nectar, then we won't want the things of this world. So I mean that's quite inconceivable to me, but I just take it on the authority of the previous acharyas that this is attainable and possible. And just the meditation of this purifies us. So this verse refers to subtle attachments as well as gross attachments. So sometimes we're attached to subtle things. We're attached to adoration. We're attached to things that can't be seen immediately, but they're in the heart, and we know they're there. So that's also the holy name purifies those things as well. It refers to karmakandya, which means desiring elevation to the heavenly planets and the possibility to enjoy the godly delights of Lord Indra. And this is actually, this process is possible within the Vedas. This process is described, how to attain the heavenly planets. But it's not as easy as chanting the holy name. One has to do all kinds of sacrifices at specific times to be completely clean. You have to follow very, very strict rules, which is almost impossible in this age. But just by chanting the holy names, we get so much more than that. And that's the special mercy of Lord Chaitanya. But we have to be humble enough to accept that gift and accept the purification of heart that comes with it. So actually, from a Western perspective, Karmakandya is quite an elevated platform because it's within the Vedic system, and it's focused on the attainment of much more worthy goal than a Mercedes-Benz and a nice house in the suburbs. If you want sense gratification, that's the way to go. You're going to be much more satisfied that way. But it still won't satisfy the heart. And in fact, Lord Chaitanya is so uncompromising. He wants us to achieve the highest goal in life and not to waste time aspiring the heavenly planets and then falling back down to earth after thousands of years of enjoyment up there, and he's like, don't waste time. He's a hard taskmaster sometimes, because he wants us to achieve the greatest bliss, which he describes in the final four verses of the Shikshastikam. Let's read the final 4 verses together now. We'll read all of them one after another. Ahinanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Gavam Buddho Vipaya Tlapada Parvaja Shitatuli Satisham Vichintaya. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Nanam Gadadashukaraya Vadanam Gadadam Rupaya Ulake Vichitam Vabhukada Tavanamagane Bhavishyati. O my Lord, will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy names? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs on my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? Yugayitam Nimeshena Chakshusha Pravishayitam Shanyayitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Viraviname. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. Ashlisha Vavadatam Vinashtamam Adarshanam Mamahatam Uruktiva Yatatata Vivatu Lampato Makananatas Sairana. No one is Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, and makes me broken-hearted by not being everything. This is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. So these last 4 verses describe a very elevated stage of bhakti, of devotion. What we're practicing is sat, and this describes spontaneous devotional service, because it relates to the higher stages about their relation. But I'll just say what Srila Prabhupada said, the Acharyas. Constantly thinking of the Lord and relishing our relations with Him, and prema, which is pure love of God. So these are the higher stages that one reaches after one sadhana bhakti, which is delineated in the first 4 verses. So most of us on the first 4 bhaktis, the different processes Lord Chaitanya recommends. And once one knows, we develop this intense bliss and love for Krishna, and anything material just doesn't disturb us at all. The first few stages are, which is faith. Shraddha, we have sadhu sangha, taking association of the devotees, and learning how to associate with devotees, which is quite an art. How to satisfy the devotees, and relate according to proper Vaishnava etiquette. And then we have which means practicing the process of bhakti, chanting on the japa beads, means doing kirtan, doing sankirtan, which we did today, harinam, and different services that devotees do. So that's bhajana kriya. And then we have anatha-nivritti. Anatha-nivritti is the cleansing of the mirror of the heart. It means taking out of the heart all these unwanted things that are standing between us and pure love of Krishna. And that's where the work often comes in with devotees. And then we reach a stage of nishta, which means we're steady and fixed in devotional service. We don't fall down from that. And then from there comes all the higher stages. And these stages are described as consecutive, but they also occur all at the same time. So we associate with devotees, sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, we come together and we serve together, and through that we get anartha nivritti. So that's the cleansing of the heart. So the anartha nivritti is described sometimes as rough pebbles put into a bag, and by shaking the bag, tumbling the pebbles, eventually they all become smooth and shiny. But it's not so nice, not so pleasant, when our false egos rub up against each other. It feels uncomfortable with the sharp edges. So sometimes we find in life we go through very intense experience, emotionally and financially, on all levels. But then when we come out of it, we realize how much of that was Krishna's mercy, and how much happier actually I am now than I was before. So that's the process of cleansing the mirror of the heart that Lord Chaitanya emphasizes in the beginning verses of the Shikshastikam. As with the recitation of all bona fide Vedic prayers, there's something called Palashruti, or the promised results of chanting them. And it's in the final section of the handout we gave you. Prabhura Shikshastika Shlokaye Padesune Vishnu Prema Bhaktika Padetine Tine. If anyone hears these 8 verses of instruction by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his ecstatic love and devotion to Krishna increases day by day. So all we have to do is to recite the Shikshastikam, and we will develop a taste. So in conclusion, the Shikshastikam, according to Srila Prabhupada, is Lord Chaitanya's mission statement. And we know this because in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, the first chapter is entitled Lord Chaitanya's Mission. And in that chapter, all we have are the Shikshastikam prayers. So this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission statement, which was fulfilled later on by the 8 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Oh, 6. Sorry, I just added 2 Goswamis. So besides for the multifaceted image of the white lotus blossoming in darkest nights, the main themes we discussed today are, first of all, darkness. In this world, we find ourselves in spiritual darkness, and the congregational chanting of the holy names brings us into light. On the Back to Godhead magazine, Srila Prabhupada has written this in a kind of a sutra form. So, light. So there's no darkness. It exists on its own as light. The second image we discussed was the image of fire. So we're a forest fire of existence. Samsara, Mahadava, our coolness of the holy name can extinguish Nirvapana. The Sankirtan movement is described as both a blooming white lotus and also as a moon, a waxing moon, because the moon gives us relief from heat and it also gives us nourishment. Actually, Krishna says, I become the moon and I supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Achyuta. So because of the moon, vegetables have taste. If there was no moon, the vegetables wouldn't have any. So Krishna so the holy name is a moon that's cooling down the fire, nourishing us and giving us this taste. Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. This Purnamrita, this ocean of nectar which is there, and we can taste it even if we're not in the highest level of bhakti. Just by chanting one round of Hare Krishna, immediately we get a few drops of that nectar. And I was thinking of this image of a waterfall, and the true love of God is like the gush of this beautiful waterfall, and around the waterfall is mist. Have any of you ever been close to a big waterfall? And this mist permeates like for quite a circumference of the waterfall, and it's so cooling and so lovely. And just by chanting the holy names, we immediately get the mist of the fountain of love of God. The final theme was humility, and this humility is exemplified both by Lord Chaitanya in his life, by Krishnadas Kaviraj in the writing of Chaitanya Charitamrita, and by Srila Prabhupada, who brought Chaitanya Charitamrita to the West, and he gave us access to this beautiful process. And each of these acharyas showed us practically how to be humble. For example, with Lord Chaitanya, we have the instance last time with Ramachandra Puri. So Ramachandra Puri was senior to him, was his guru's godbrother. But seniority does not always equal advancement, as we know in the world. So Ramachandra Puri was envious of Lord Chaitanya. So he actually came to where Lord Chaitanya was to try and find some fault in him. And he noticed some ants in the ground, and he immediately concluded that Lord Chaitanya was eating too much, especially for a sannyasi. So he was very, he immediately, even if there's not a fault, he found a fault. So he's an expert fault finder. And sometimes you come across people like this looking for faults. And if there's no fault, they will find one. And even if there's a tiny fault, they'll magnify that fault. So what happened was, instead of fighting back, finding fault in Ramachandra Puri, Lord Chaitanya just immediately acquiesced, and he just cut his eating by 3/4. So he just assumed a humble position, and then Ramachandra Puri was defeated because there was nothing else he could criticize Mahaprabhu for. And as soon as Ramachandra Puri left the devotees, it felt like a huge burden had dropped to the heads of all the servants of Mahaprabhu. Because a person like that who comes from an egotistical perspective, no one wants to be around him. It's just, completely becomes a burden on the heads of the Vaishnavas. So that's the example of what we don't want to become. Because with advancement comes the weeds. The growth of the bhakti lata, of the wheat of devotion, we also springs up these weeds that we have in the heart. And we need to cut down those weeds. Otherwise, we can also end up reaching a certain level of advancement and then leaving the association of devotees because we criticize devotees unnecessarily. When I was preparing for the class and reading the final chapter of Anjalila, which is where the Shikshastika prayers appear again, I was so struck by how Krishnadas Kaviraj takes such a humble position in terms of his own talents. He praises Vrindavan Das Thakur, who wrote another biography of Lord Chaitanya called Chaitanya Bhagavat. And he says he's just taking a little drop from the ocean of nectar of Vrindavan Das Thakur and giving it to us. So he offers his obeisances to all the Vaishnavas. This is Krishnadas Kaviraj. He was directly empowered by the Madan Mohan deity in Vrindavan. The Madan Mohan deity came to him and asked him to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But he offers his obeisances at lotus feet of all the Vaishnavas, and that includes the readers, that includes us. the readers who are actually reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it's because of us, he says, that he's able to write this beautiful Shastra. And then finally we see this example in the life of Srila Prabhupada. There was one occasion where Srila Prabhupada was presiding over an initiation ceremony, and the devotees had messed it up somehow, and the right paraphernalia wasn't there, and Srila Prabhupada was getting angry, because the role of the spiritual master is to discipline the disciple, and when things are not done properly, then Srila Prabhupada exerted the force of his anger, transcendental anger. And then there was one devotee there, like one boy, he just come a couple of times, and he said to Srila Prabhupada, he said, don't get angry. He said, chant Hare Krishna. And instead of cursing him like someone like Sadhu Rasamuni would have done, Srila Prabhupada just picked up his beads and started chanting Hare Krishna. Gauranga. So we can also take shelter of the Vaishnavas, like Krishnadas Kaviraj and Srila Prabhupada. And actually this is what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do. He wanted the devotees to honor one another and associate with one another, just like they did historically during the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's why every day we chant the mantra, Vanja Kalpa Rubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desire for everyone. And they are full of compassion for all the fallen conditioned souls. Thank you very much for giving of your time and coming to listen. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
My question is that you explained how important is humility. It is the key to access the taste in a holy name, and how rare it is that people are not attracted to holy name. One reason is they don't have genuine humility. So, but you explained also the humility of great acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, Vishwanath, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and people like that. So it is not in our power to just all of a sudden create that humility within us ourselves. So how can we then get it? Is there some practical means something we can do that in order to access that type of humility, which gives us those opportunities?
Right, so that's a wonderful question that Dinodayal Prabhu has asked. He's asked, how can we practically develop humility if we don't feel humility? So the first thing is to want it, to aspire for it. Immediately means we're on the path to having it. Then we can pray to the acharyas. We can recite the Shikshastikam. That's a very good way to attain humility. And also practical things like we should praise the Vaishnavas. That's just as a principle, we should go out of our way to look for the good in devotees and praise them for any good thing we see. And also to be grateful for everything that happens to us. Even if it's something that's very painful, but to be grateful that seeing everything as Krishna's mercy. Even if we can just do it theoretically, Like something bad happens and we just say it's Krishna's mercy. I don't know how it's Krishna's mercy, but somehow be thankful that whatever happens is Krishna's mercy, and we'll see after a while that actually it is. Because although we feel devastated at the time, there's so much benefit we get later on, because a layer of our false ego has been shaved off. And it's such a relief when that happens. It's like this onion covered by these layers, so many subtle layers, and then when one thin layer comes off, it's like, oh, thank you, Krishna, thank you. So it's just those small things. Gratitude, forgiveness, compassion and acceptance. Sometimes it's hard for us to accept things that have happened. We're just being in the place where we accept it and don't fight against it. I think that's very healing to the heart. And then with time, the mantra will do its work. The mantra is it's scientific. It's a metaphysical cleanser. So it's going to cleanse our hearts. The more we chant, the hearts are going to become clean, willy-nilly. So just sticking with the process is also very powerful. And also we can do service. Come to the temple, we can clean the floors. Any small thing you like to do, we can come and do that. And that's something very practical. Just come and do a bit of service. Or try and serve the devotees. See if there's someone that, that needs something and help them. That's even more, that's like triple the benefit because you're serving and you're serving them. So the mercy comes back much more. So we're always greedy for that mercy. So there's all these different ways to get it. No lack of way to get it. Does that answer your question, Prabhu? Thank you so much. Is it time for kirtan?
Yeah. So we'd like to thank Dhira Lalita Devi Dasi for her Sunday feast talk. Hare Krishna.